Never mind. That was nice.
Welcome to Acting Schmacting. I don't think you guys know, this is a podcast. We're starting it now. And my producer, Stephen Fink, is in the back. And this is, I don't know what I'm doing. Anyhow.
Wait a minute, don't you have to say action?
Action.
There we go.
But I think first of all, we should be very forthcoming here and honest that we both went to Lincoln High School.
I remember you on the swimming team. No, different Lincoln.
San Francisco.
Oh, well, that's very much like Lincoln, Nebraska.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we're from different Lincolns.
What were you like? What was high school like for you?
Well, I always wondered why none of the top girls could see anything in me.
And did they?
It's still going on, by the way. Mark Groucho would get a laugh with that. I always felt that I was kind of not one of the big wheels. That was a term used to high school in those days. And I just never felt like I was in plays, and I did that, but I never could count on having a date.
Oh, really?
Yeah, never.
So were you outgoing, or were you shy, or what was your demeanor?
I tried to be outgoing, but nobody noticed me out there.
I totally understand. Sure. And you were a gymnast?
That I was. That I might say that's the only thing in my life that I am excessively proud of. My dad, who was kind of an athlete himself, he was actually an English teacher. But the year before I went into high school, he said, you know, it'd be nice if you could letter in something. We all know the term letter. Someone on a team gets to wear the letter because you're outstanding. And I didn't play football, as you might imagine, nor basketball, nor soccer, nor any of that stuff. But they had a funny-looking long leather thing on legs with two handles called the horse, the pommel horse. And that's all we had, and mats.
What does one do on a pommel horse?
Well, one thing you do on the pommel horse is fall off. But you grab the two handles, your legs swing over the end of it and then around here, and you do scissors with your legs. And if you have a really great coach, as I did, my senior year in competition, he taught me the triple rear dismount. How many have done that? Hands? Oh, there's a guy doing it now. It was a very difficult dismount where you used all three parts of the horse in a spectacular move. And I think that won me the state championship. Did you know? Where were you then? Yeah, and actually, because I got to therefore on Fridays wear a white white jacket and the letter L for Lincoln, and you also got an L pin, a little gold pin that was an L, and you probably had an L pin too.
No.
No. Well, you can borrow mine if you ever really need it. But,
thank you.
But girls would do virtually anything for an L pin. Other guys told me. But I had it anyway.
So, your parents were English teachers?
Well, yeah.
So, mom and dad?
All three parents. My stepmother, after my mother died, was also a teacher. And so, therefore, I correct people when they say whatever people say these days.
Do you like dude? When people say dude?
When did that start?
I have no frigging idea.
Seems to me like a decade ago.
No, more, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you like that?
I don't care for it especially.
No.
I don't feel like a dude.
No.
I'm an expert, since you asked, Western rider. And dude seems to demean horsemanship.
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah. But it's very dispiriting when your kids call you dude dad.
Yeah.
That's sad. And I read that you had favorite television shows when you would come home from. Who were your go-to television shows growing up in Lincoln?
Well, here's how television came to Lincoln, not that anybody wants to know, but when the coaxial cable got to Nebraska, it was just in time for Milton Berle.
I loved him.
And then the McCarthy hearings.
Oh.
That was spectacular. That was.
I saw the McCarthy hearings.
Yeah, we were kids together.
We were kids
apparently.
together at Lincoln.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people who didn't have TV would bring us some food and say, would you mind if we came over tomorrow and watched your television? I was glued to the McCarthy hearings.
Yeah. They were very dramatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, that was. And later, got to know Richard Nixon in a variety of ways.
Please tell us.
You can ask me about that.
Please tell us.
Oh,
about
really?
it. Yes.
About Nixon?
Nixon. And
Well,
since we're in the Watergate, and our lives are now
right.
literally paralleling that,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. But Nixon got pissed off at you, right?
How do you know these things?
I've been studying like it's my life because I am such a fan.
I see. Yeah, well, Nixon, there was a time when I was persona grata at the Nixon White House, and I even got invited to an evening of Shakespeare there with Nicol Williamson. Nixon is interesting. You want to jot that down in case. When you looked at him in a receiving line, which it was, I realized I'm face to face with Richard Milhous Nixon, and his nose has appalling width. Just startling. You couldn't take your eyes off of it for its appalling width. And one of us didn't seem to know who was going to speak first in the reception line. And he said, who's doing your show tonight? And I said, Joe Namath, he's sitting in for me. How are his knees? I wanted to say, well, last time I caressed them, they seemed quite presentable. And that was our small talk. And then I quickly moved to Mrs. Nixon, who was adorable. I wish she had written a book, don't we? But obviously was not going to. And then we went into this little theater in the White House, and Henry Kissinger was there in the usual crowd. And Nicol Williamson did the thrilling evening of Shakespeare. During it, about 10 minutes before it was over, there was a smell of smoke, like wastebasket burning or something. And that passed, and the show ended. And we were getting, and I saw the great Kenneth Tynan, the great British critic, coming up the aisle. And I said, did you smell smoke? What do you think it was? And he said, they've let Agnew into the library. Oh, I have something about Agnew too, if you can't do without it. But yeah, years later, I saw Nixon, after it was all over, sitting by a dock in Montauk waiting for a restaurant to open. And the waiter said, look who's sitting over there. And there he was, like an old seabird, sitting all in black, staring out to sea. And his daughter Julie was there. And I didn't know what to say. So I thought, well, maybe I can be funny. He hasn't seen me yet. So I got a waiter's menu, and I came up behind Nixon, and I said, I recommend the Yorba Linda cream pie. and the Whittier College muffins, and I tried a couple more Nixon references. And he turned, there was the nose again. "Oh," he said, "I thought that was you." And I almost said, "Well, I was behind you," in another voice, but I wouldn't want to embarrass the man. He'd been through several things by then. But we talked, and then I realized it's my turn to talk again, and I started to tell him the Nickel Williamson Agnew has been let into the library story, and I got halfway through it, realized this is among the last 3 people on earth I should be telling this story to, but I had to finish it. And then it seemed like the gulls fell silent. We were out of the doctor's. Oh. He said, "Oh, I see, book burning." I couldn't think of anything to say, but luckily Julie spoke up and said, "I hope your nightclub act was funnier than that." Oh. She was a lot of fun. And finally, I managed to say goodbye, and that was the last time I saw him. But I continued in his life.
Yes, you
You've
did.
hit a gold mine here.
Yes.
I think nowadays, if you go to YouTube or Google Cavett Nixon, you will get a shot of the great unindicted co-conspirator saying to his lickspittle, as I put it in an article, H.R. Haldeman, "Cavett, there must be some way we can screw him." That was elegant talk for him. I just thought, that's the President of the United States wants me screwed. How many can say that? Hands?
And didn't he, wasn't he sort of an ass and sort of tried to punish your staff?
Yes, I congratulate you on your encyclopedic knowledge of my troubles. Yes, he had said there must be a way to screw him. I learned later that Haldeman had at that point said, "We're working on it." I forgot about that. And then some months later, one of the ladies on my staff ran into another former lady on my staff, and she said, "Guess what? I've been audited." And she said, "That's weird. I've been audited too." Now, as we know, one of Nixon's hobbies was punishing people illegally with the IRS. And he had gotten my staff, all of them. And for the lesser paid ones, it was very hard on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that. But the son of the president said, I guess he got his revenge that way. I never got to see him again and ask him about that.
Didn't you have G. Gordon Liddy on your show?
Yes.
And didn't he tell you about how he did it?
Well, he told me a lot of good stuff, but I kept looking at him and thinking, wait a minute, this is the man who held his hand over a candle flame to show that he could be trusted not to talk. And I looked, and there was scar tissue there. So it wasn't a trick, except as a magician myself, and I shouldn't expose this. If you take an ice cube and hold it against your palm or your thumb, hold that and get your thumb real cold, you can take someone's cigarette and put it out on your thumb as they gasp and run if they're scared enough, and it won't burn. So he had done that, held a little too long, I think, so he really did get some burn. But at one moment, I said, I heard that you have a kind of a thing you like to do. You like to teach secretaries how to kill someone with a number 2 pencil. And he asked how I knew that. I've forgotten, but I did. That you hold it at the middle finger straight up, sharpened, and bring it up right under their chin. The point goes here, and into the brain. He was a hobbyist, wasn't he? But I said I would like to learn that, but oh, and he said, well, what can you trade me for it? And I said, well, I can only think of one thing I have you might like. When I was a kid, I got a 1921 judo book out of the Lincoln, Nebraska library, and there was a neck hold in it that years later had been banned because it offed a few people in competition. Killed them, for those who don't say off crudely. So, but I still knew it. One day on the playground at Prescott Junior, you never went to a Prescott school, did you? That would be too many things we have similar.
I went to Prescott, yes. But this was in Lincoln, Nebraska. No, I didn't go to.
When you said that, it made me laugh, as you have so many times upon the screen. But we got in a fight in the playground, and Herb Langus was kind of a rotten kid, and he got me down, and in those days, you didn't hit in the face, you got people down. I bet I could get you down. Well, he got me down, and I was on gravel, and I didn't like it. And I thought, wait a minute, it's a judo hold. And I don't got it. It's not this kind of thing. It's in fact this, with the head in here. You push it back. So anyway, Liddy bit on that, and we went in the back room, and he knelt a little bit with his back to me. I got this hand around his neck, and I got behind his head like this. And I thought, when I did this to Herb Langus, he died momentarily. But there he was lying in the gravel on the playground, and one eye open, one shut, he drooled, and everybody stood back. He was clearly dead. He was not. He stirred. And we haven't had much contact since then. But that was scary. And I got this thing on Liddy. I said, this is G. Gordon Liddy. I could kill him easily. That hold breaks the voice box.
Oh my God.
And breathing is affected, and you fall over and join the silent majority.
You know, when I got through doing some notes this morning, I wrote on my little ledger there, I went, risk. And the reason I did that is as I was watching some stuff, and I read your book, Brief Encounters, which is fantastic.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Acting Schmacting is about, actors are out there in their little scaredy chairs and afraid to move, and, haven't touched that script in their desk for the last 7 months. And I noticed that when you left Yale and went into New York, I mean, your whole thing was about risk. I mean, I'm going to ask you about Jack Parr and how you got to him, but where did you get that? Did you have that from the get-go, that you just were balls out, just taking a risk?
I got a reputation for being kind of gutsy and pushy, and the kind of kid who, when there was a celebrity in town in Nebraska, in my Lincoln, I would go meet them. Somehow, I'd find their hotel. I'd push my little way and little body into their life. Bob Hope came to Lincoln. And the ad said Bob Hope, and a friend of mine and I said, Bob Hope isn't going to be in town. Does it say he's going to be in town? It looks like it. So we went to this giant Hitlerian-sized coliseum on a state university in Nebraska for basketball. And we knew that we wouldn't see Bob Hope. The curtain went up, a juggler, a singer, a dog act, a guy who would swallow marbles and bring them up by the color called for. Wonderful things like that. And then the curtains closed, and Lyle Burke and I got up to leave. But we noticed that people weren't leaving. We didn't know from intermissions. So we were sure we had been screwed. We did not see Bob Hope. And then some music started. People got back in their seats, and a voice, like out of the Colgate Comedy Hour or something, said, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, the star of our show, Bob Hope." Ba-da-da-da-da-da. That's the band. Nobody sang it. And Bob Hope ambled out onto that stage, and there was nothing between him but us and air. And Lyle said, "Good God, there he is." And I felt the same way. His first words were to a woman in the front row, "Can you see me okay with those binoculars?" There was a woman 4 feet from me with binoculars in them.
So when you went to New York, you were and before you, how did you get that manuscript to Jack Parr?
That's an interesting story. By the way, I have a tooth waiting to be added as an implant.
Yes.
And sometimes it slips a bit. And would you dive for it if it does now? Because
I will,
I'll
if you
be
autograph
so
it.
Embarrassed. It's just, here, I checked it. We're okay for a minute.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You got that
that's
script?
the story. Yeah. That Jack Parr thing is the reason that you are not sitting in that chair now talking to an empty chair. It did everything. Everything that happened to me stemmed from the moment I handed a monologue that I had written for Jack Parr while being a copy boy at Time magazine. And I was pulling in $60 a week, so I didn't want to endanger that job. But went to 30 Rock, back entrance, 6th Avenue, I knew which elevator. It took you up to the floor Jack's office was on. And as the gods would have it, here came Jack Parr from the men's room. And I stood a little bit in front of him, and I had put my monologue at the last second. I thought, I'm going to put it in one of these Time magazine envelopes. He'll see that. He has a big history with Time magazine. So he came ambling along and said, "Hi." And I said, "Mr. Parr, I wrote a monologue for you." He said, "Oh, Time magazine. Okay." He took it, went into his office. I felt like a fool. But sat in the audience. Jack came out for his monologue, reached into his pocket, took out the paper, folded papers, and I thought, I'm in show business. And he opened it, and I knew what he was going to say. Some kid came up to me in the hall. I don't know who he was. And he gave me this monologue, and it's better than anything my writers have given me in weeks. He was always nice to the employees. I mean, they just, and I thought, uh-oh, here it goes. Didn't know what it was. Thought, which of my jokes will he open with? And he said, "Have you ever had a mother-in-law?" Somebody had written him a mother-in-law monologue. I got down in the seat in the audience, but during the show, he went into the audience with a hand mic, and he said to a strange woman, "Do you read the news?" And she said, "Yeah, how about those?" That was the first day that pirate ship was in the headlines of every New York paper, the first of those series of hijackings of ships. And she said, "What do you think about that, Jack?" Jack said, "Must have shaken up the passengers to hear, 'Attention, please, this is your pirate speaking.'" Well, it got an even bigger laugh than that.
Really? Had you written that?
Right?
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it was my line. And then he talked to some other people, and he worked in another one of my lines.
Wow.
Then I thought I had really made it. Of course, I was smart enough to get in the same elevator with him after the show. And he said, "Oh, you're the kid that, you want to write, don't you?" And I said,
Wow.
he said, "Come back in a week. Bring a few more jokes." Believe it or not, I did, of course. And from that moment on, everything happened for me. I got on the Jack Parr staff. And I never missed a Jack Parr show before this. And there I was, and there were Johnny Winters backstage, and there was Genevieve and Charlie Weaver, and I was in hog heaven.
Yeah, yeah.
I had gotten to be with my idol.
And you wrote a killer joke for, I believe, a Miss Mansfield?
Yes. May I take a drill for this? Oh, that's good booze. Jackie Gleason, for those old enough to remember. Yeah. A highlight of my time with Jack Parr. Jane Mansfield. Anyone know the name? Hands? Yes. What about the rest of you? Gorgeous, voluminous Jane Mansfield. And Jack was thrilled. You'd have thought we'd gotten Garbo or something. And I couldn't believe it. I wrote an introduction for her, and so did everybody else, and all the four writers, and he hated them. This happened from time to time. So we all had to go back to our typewriters and try to write a really good, funny, brilliant monologue introduction, for Jane Mansfield. He rejected them again. The old school two writers that were sick of it, they just went home and said, "To hell with him." But I was the new kid. I couldn't go home. I went to the typewriter, and it came to mind, I gave him, "Ladies and gentlemen, here they are, Jane Mansfield." It was a big hit, even stolen in a way a couple of times. But Jack was utterly kind to me for weeks after that because he got such a laugh with it.
Was he a nice man?
Jack was not always a nice man. Now that since you put it that way, you must have guessed. No, Jack was the most interesting, fascinating, difficult to understand, neurotic, touchy, spiteful, and swell guy that I've ever known. He was a fascinating personality and such a wit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wish I could think of an example of one of his great ad libs. Oh, one night, Charlie Weaver came on as Santa at Christmas, but he was drunk. And Jack didn't know until he walked out, and he was clearly drunk. Weaver said, "What are you looking at?" He said, "The first time I ever saw Santa in the bag." And that's pretty good.
That's really good.
Many a great ad.
Speaking of a drunk, and you've been asked this a million times, but your episode on your wonderful show, which I told you on the phone I was glued to. Not only that I love you, and you brought sanity into my life, but I watched you because you, as Groucho said about you, you brought Nebraska. What did he say? He said something about you struck the mother lode.
Yeah, oh, he said, "I saw you on Merv Griffin and your jokes about your being a hayseed from Nebraska at Yale."
Right.
I think with that you have struck a mother lode.
Right.
Keep working it. And I did.
Yeah.
And I had jokes like, first day at Yale, I was very aware of being from Nebraska. And I didn't know there were Ivy League proper clothes that you wore. Mm-hmm. I went on the campus in brown and white shoes. And the worst part was that the white one kept getting dirty. 2, 3, 4. That's a joke.
So, and then did you, what is a mystery shopper? Because one of the things I heard that you were in New York, yes.
You must have professionals working for you.
No, not a one. What is a mystery shopper?
I had utterly forgotten this. I was out of work. It was before I had anything at all. I was an out-of-work actor in New York, my first year of making rounds. And I got a call. Someone said, do you want to be a store kind of detective type thing? It's a job you've been offered. You go to a store like Macy's. First you go to this woman's office and get fingerprinted and so on. You go to a store like Macy's and you go over and you watch a guy wait on a woman who wants a vacuum cleaner. You watch the transaction. You check to see if he's nice, if he's polite, if he's pushy, whatever he is. You go home and write up a report and hand it in to this lady who had bars on her door for her office for store detectives or whatever. I don't know what to call myself, but it was a humiliating job. I felt like a rat. And the most inept salesman I could find, I gave a great rating to. Just for fun. I didn't last a long time there, but it beat being a caddy. Other job. You might not even know about this one.
No.
High school, summer, caddy, Hillcrest Country Club. When Bob Hope would come down from the sky crossing the country and play golf. He loved this country club so. And he would come down and get 4 or 5 Republicans and play golf with them. And one time he had done this before and I thought, people got to, before I ever met Bob Hope, people got to see Bob Hope in person. And I asked this one kid, and he said, yeah, I saw, he was playing golf, and he had on a big Hawaiian shirt on. And a snotty kind of kid said, hey, Bob, your slip is showing. Hope said, so is your father. So is your father, apostrophe S. And I didn't get it for about a year, but I was still in Nebraska at that time. Hope did that show in Lincoln. When it was over, I thought, I got to remember everything he said. He had Marilyn Maxwell with him. We needn't go into that entirely, but he did, and movie star of the time for our young folks. And at one point, he brushed her sort of thigh accidentally as he passed her on stage. And she said, Bob, you're not allowed to do things like that to me. And he said, read your contract. And I thought, someday I'm going to say that somewhere. But Bob Hope in Lincoln, as I ran around to the stage doors, I said, he came down about 8 stairs after the show was over, and he got into a Cadillac and they drove him off. But as he was coming down those stairs, I said, fine show, Bob. He said, hey, thanks, son. Next day at school, I told all about my chats with Bob Hope that I had for hours. And later, when we finally met on my show, I said, you know, Bob, years ago, you played Lincoln. You can be on the scares. A fine show job, fine show kids, whatever. He said, was that you? 30 years later. Yeah, what a guy.
When your show first came out in '68, it was with ABC, right?
ABC.
Yeah, and you tell a story about the network executive coming over to you and saying, we don't want to bother these people. I can't remember the word. There's a chapter you write in Brief Encounters about.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is when I did my very first show for ABC.
Yes.
My very first taping. Can you imagine your life at one point, suddenly you're in charge of a 90-minute live-ish talk show on television, no stops, and you've never done anything like that before. I said in an interview once, it's a great job if you've never had a nervous breakdown and would like to know what it was like. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
I remember I was standing on stage for the first taping, and I started to talk to the guest, and somebody over there held up a sign, and they took it down before I could read it. And I didn't know, did it say go to commercial, or you're horrible, or what? I didn't see it, and something else happened over here, and I couldn't read their lips. I looked to the guest, whose lips had stopped moving. No idea what the guest had said. I talked to Stephen Colbert about that. We had similar experiences. I said, did your staff tell you what you did wrong at the beginning? And he said, no, but if I do something wrong, they probably will. But
didn't they tell you to take it easy, and they didn't want to shake up things?
Well, there was that for sure, yeah.
Yeah, and how did you handle that?
Well, they were very subtle about it, really. I taped the first show with Muhammad Ali and Angela Lansbury and a couple other guests that I've forgotten. Went backstage to be congratulated. Somehow I got through it. There was an ABC executive, and I posed for my compliment, and he said, nobody gives a shit what Gore Vidal and Muhammad Ali think about Vietnam. And to my eternal credit, I said, can you prove that? Well, that didn't go over any better than it did. Oh, well, thank you. So I had a hard time in that sort of thing. Here's the irony.
Yes.
They said, we're not going to show that as your first show.
Really?
What? First show was going to be 3 days later. That was supposed to be it. They made me tape another show. It went great too. But on the air was that show, and then the one that had really gone great with Ali and everybody was the second show, and happily a reviewer said, Dick's show finally hit its stride tonight. Wrong show, but nice compliment. Boy.
Were you fully? I watched the first show, and I went. It's all there. It's all there. It's all there. The wit, the charm, the monologue went well. Everything, and I went. How did you pull all that together? I have to tell you, as a young actor, what I really wanted and why I love what you and Jack Benny were my heroes, because you are you were minimalists, and
I like that.
Yeah, and you did with less. You did everything.
Wow.
And I went. I want to do it like that. You and Benny, and then I saw you just crafting that joke with Benny up there.
Oh, yeah.
How did you get to that? Were you always like? I mean, were you always like this?
I don't know. I don't come from a long line of vaudevillians or actors or so on. Sometimes, whatever that is you're talking about, just saves your life.
Yes, it does.
You know the feeling when something happens on stage that you made right. You did it right.
Yes.
Great, really worked.
Yeah.
Can't wait to do it again. One night I was on Johnny's show. This may be the sort of thing you're talking about. I was new. I was not a big name by any means, but having worked for him, he had me on when I started doing nightclubs and stuff. And we came to the end of the show. There were 4 guests. He's such a good friend that he brought me out first, even though the other people were stars. Well, at the end, I had moved down the couch 4 times till I was sitting on Ed McMahon, practically. Johnny was asking people as they were going off the air, you got your musical opening, good luck on that, thank you for your special, you're such and such. And I thought he's stretching so he won't get to me because I don't have anything to mention. But he said, Richard, what are you up to? And I thought, oh God. And something visited me. And I said, well, Johnny, I'm I'm working on a sitcom, really. It's a humorous version of Gilligan's Island.
Ad-lib? Wonderful, wonderful. You know,
I got the ultimate honor. Earl Wilson misquoted it. But anyway, and it just killed him. And I thought, if I could do that, if any of us could do that when we're cornered like that, it would be nice to have it there all the time, which of course it isn't.
what, how did you meet Muhammad Ali? I don't think you guys know that this show on HBO is, you knew he was on your show 14 times?
No, he was on, he was on at least 10 times over the years. And Groucho was on like 10 or 12 times. And somebody looking at all that, especially the Ali tape, said, you know, there's a special in this for Ali. He was on some. And we became wonderful friends.
And you went into the ring with him?
I did in a slightly humorous manner, which the viewer can be the judge of. But yeah, and but as each show came on, we were better and better friends. It's not that unlikely. Our backgrounds are similar. But my God, I realized this guy is becoming my best friend. We had wonderful times together, and what a man. When I first, to get to your question, I was writing for Jerry Lewis, that 2-hour Jerry Lewis show that ABC is still paying for. And somebody said, we were at the theater where the show came from, go downstairs quick. Muhammad Ali is out in front of the theater. And I went down, and there were 8 or 10 people, and 2 of them were having a nasty verbal fight and threatening, and one of them was Muhammad Ali, and the other one was a very surprised man who had just come along the sidewalk. And Ali said something just terrible and said, I can't waste my time with a guy like you. And he walked just far enough to be off camera. And he burst into laughter, goes over, grabs the guy. And I realized then this man is a superb actor. His show business instincts are as good as George Jessel's. Well, whoever he is. Henry Fonda, famous for always hitting his mark, where an actor has to, without looking, go to where he's supposed to be. And Ali could have, if he had not done too many fights, and I was among the people who tried to get him to quit and failed, unfortunately, long before it got the best of him. I said, there's nobody like this on earth. There's a thing called, there's a word in Spanish for a thing you feel emanating from a person when you're with them. And some great people have it. And Ali had it as much as possible. And he would kid me. He would say, I'd say, nice having you back on the show and something. And he'd say, you know, Dick, Howard Cosell gets paid for being an idiot. What do you make? And they would laugh. Great fun. I had Ali and Fraser on just before the big Ali Fraser show together. They came down the 2 aisles and the audience went crazy. While they were talking for about...
Please don't. No, don't.
Is there a doctor?
Oh, no. You okay?
Never drink in public. Anyway, they're both on stage. It's a little dangerous. They were not fond of each other, and Ali's sitting here, and Fraser's there, and he had many bitternesses, and it's often said if it hadn't been for Ali, Fraser would have been the big fighter. So it got a little tense, but then suddenly Ali said to Fraser, let's pretend we're friends for a minute and get him, pointing to me. These tall giants came on either side of me, got me under the armpits, lifted me what seemed like 8 feet off the ground, and so I'm up there with my legs dangling, and the audience loved it, and but I looked at the monitor and I said, yeah, I just looked at the monitor. I'm squeezed between you two guys. It looks like a giant Oreo cookie. Well, is there a phrase like questionable taste?
You know, your show had such diverse personalities on it. I remember you would have Lester Maddox, and then you would have G. Gordon Liddy, and then you would have Judy Garland, and then Groucho, and all of this. But I happened to watch the Lester Maddox show, and that you kept your equanimity with that.
That was a tough one.
That was a tough one, and you didn't lose it. Can you talk to us about that? Because it's a huge, the countdown when he was counting for you to apologize, I believe.
Well, it was, I don't know whose idea it was, it'd be funny to have Lester Maddox on with, ready, Truman Capote and Jim Brown.
Wow.
And little Lester plopped down beside Jim Brown and opened with, I thought you was a singer. Brown looked down at him like, I think someone said, the way a duchess looks at a bed bug. And I thought he might crumple him up like a Dixie cup. But the show went on. Lots of trouble, a lot of tension. And we come back from commercial, and Lester says to me, that segment before, you called all the people of Georgia bigots. I said, no, I didn't. You did. You said everybody in Georgia bigots, and you're going to apologize right now. I said, well, I would be crazy to say all the people in Georgia were bigots or something like that. He said, you said it. I said, okay, Lester, what do you want to do? He said, you apologize or I'm going to walk off. That was tempting. But I said, well, okay. If I've called anyone a bigot who isn't a bigot, I apologize. Well, Lester saw through that and hauled ass. I walked off the stage. As I pointed out the next day, being a politician who knows the value of television time, Lester walked off 88 minutes into a 90-minute show. It was just time to get off. Groucho, anyway, Truman Capote, who was on that one with Lester, said, you know, that he had been down to Georgia and eaten at Lester's famous Pickwick restaurant, where you saw that photograph of him, and it said, Lester Maddox discourages a black customer from coming in with a baseball bat. Well, it wasn't a baseball bat. He was always pleased to say it was a pick handle, a pick. So therefore, it was fine to drive someone away with it. And Truman, I remember, I can hear him now saying, I went down there and I had dinner at this Pickwick restaurant. And I can tell you this, it wasn't finger-licking good. Reminded me of the time Truman was a wonderful guest, and he was on with Groucho, and that Groucho, that great golf hat he had with the little men on the top and knitted, and 3 knitted golf balls. And he had that show on the night that he proposed marriage to Truman Capote. Yes, you heard it right. Finally, just to make sure that everybody got that he reminded reminded Truman that he had proposed marriage to him, and Truman said, well, I could never marry a man who has 3 balls. And he added the words on top of his hat, but nobody heard it because 3 balls got the laugh. So that was fun.
How did you meet Groucho? And I know he was a hero of yours.
I met Groucho the day after his God, the great George S. Kaufman,
Yes, yes.
playwright, director, great wit, died. And went to his memorial service, and there across from me in an anteroom, because this memorial service for Kaufman drew everybody who's ever been caricatured by Herb Block, Hirschfeld, the Hirschfeld cartoon. I look, there's so-and-so, and I recognized them from the Hirschfeld cartoons. Half of show business and half of the theater world was there at the Kaufman service. And I looked across, it was so crowded, we were in an anteroom, the people I was with. And I froze. There, sitting across from me, 8 feet away, with an unlit cigar, was Groucho Marx. My God. I thought, this is it. Moss Hart took out some papers and read the eulogy, put it back and said to the casket behind him, I heard you, George. It needs cutting. And so I'll never forget that. Went outside, and this theater world, as I say, it was there, and I heard a voice say, hi, Groucho, I'm Edna Ferber. And I thought, we're not in Nebraska anymore, Toto. Wow. Edna Ferber, all of them. I watched Groucho walk toward Fifth Avenue. It was a sunny day, and he was with Art Carney and Abe Burrows. They left. There's my hero standing on the corner of 81st and Fifth Avenue. I went up and said, Groucho, I'm a big fan of yours. Highly original, isn't it? I'm a big fan of yours. And the great man turned to me and said, well, if it gets any hotter, I could use a big fan. And that was the beginning of our relationship. Went to the plaza. He said, it sounded like his game show. He said, he insulted every doorman as we walked down to the plaza. And they laughed. And this is what sounded like the game show. Well, you certainly seem like a nice young man, and I'd like you to have lunch with me.
Oh, my God.
As they say, they brought me 2, and then they brought me 2 more. I had lunch with Groucho Marx. We sat down, waiter came over. Oh, Mr. Marx, yeah. Have you got any fruit in the kitchen? I mean, besides the chef? And stuff like that. I kept pinching myself.
Not bad.
But from that on, we became friends for years.
Yeah.
On the shows many times. And one day a woman came up to him, we were out drinking, she said, I'm sorry, are you Groucho or Harpo? He said, I was about to ask you the same question. Oh, man.
And but he was a bit, well, I want to ask you a question. We have actors who listen to this podcast, and there are actors out there. What do you tell an actor who's starting out? I noticed that actors more and more, especially in this milieu and all this craziness going on, worry. What do you tell an actor who worries? What do you do? Do you worry? Did you worry?
I worried all the time. I knew I would forget my lines. I knew that I would bump into somebody on the stage and knock
did?
them down.
Yeah.
I always did, yeah. I don't know how you sensed that, but
Did you?
I wouldn't know really what to tell somebody. I just remember asking somebody, though, as I was about to read my first play in high school, what will I have to know when I'm out there on stage? And he said, okay, here's one lesson. Nobody is looking at your hands. I knew what he meant.
Yeah.
You know how amateur actors will make the gesture at the wrong moment and they'll put their hands in their pockets and take them out again. And you think, that was great advice. Nobody's looking at your hands. Now, if it turns out that nobody's looking at you either, it can be fun. But actors go through hell.
They do.
With worry and ulcers and fears. And then that strange thing happens, really only happened to me once, and I've done a lot of plays, where for a moment, I became the person I was playing. Now, you don't do that normally. That's not what the art of acting is, become someone else. But for a moment, it happened, frightened me. It was Reverend Hale in View from the Bridge.
Yeah.
And when I went off stage, one of the other actors said, "You scared me in that scene." Never had it happen again. But that moment must happen to you at times when you think,
absolutely,
I'm really in this.
Yeah.
It's me.
And so did you overcome worry?
It never happened again. I was good enough, but never that.
Yeah.
I would try to think of something funny about acting when I was on stage with other people, and I hope I don't forget. I know I got a line coming out. Oh yeah, that's what it is. So, and that reminded me of George S. Kaufman, who appeared on the Parr Show. Wonderful, classic appearance. NBC erased it, by the way.
Yeah.
And many other things, including all of Johnny Carson's New York stuff. He was livid. Never saw him so mad. But, oh, Lord, all that stuff gone. Kaufman said that he happened to go back to check a play he had directed. And I guess because they knew he was out front, had been running a while, they knew he was there to check up on the actors. And one poor actor, nervous because of that, who had a line about what a beautiful woman Charlene was, and wait till you meet Charlene. Her beauty will just take your breath away. And that unfortunate actor on that night said, wait till you meet Charlene. Her breath would take your beauty away.
Oh my God. Do we have time for some questions?
Questions from the audience.
Well, I thought it was
nice.
the summons server. I've had that.
We have some questions. Do you have some time? Here we go.
There's only
This
one
is
more
one I
page.
wanted to ask you. At this point in your life, this was written before we did this. Do you like being the interviewer or the interviewee? That's a good question.
They're absolutely opposite each other. It's so strange. I think I much prefer being interviewed because you can make mistakes, and at the very beginning, the mistake I made mostly doing a talk show was I couldn't hear what the guests were saying. I would be so nervous, and I would have notes, and this story about Brazil, the story about this, the story about this, 1, 2, 3, and I would live for my notes and realize I wasn't hearing really what they said. And that's what somebody on my staff said. You know, you sometimes, you don't seem to have heard. Here's how that would look. A guest would be where you are and would say, I can't ever forget that day. We unburied the old trunk and we lifted it, and its rusty hinges squeaked, and you'll never guess what was inside. And I would say, "Do you have any hobbies?" No.
I understand completely.
Try watching, you know that feeling.
Oh, absolutely.
Try watching yourself say that when you see the tape later.
Here's a good question. If you had the chance to interview anyone in history, who would it be and why?
Well, I'd rather not be in history, but be here now. But I don't. Oscar Wilde,
Yeah.
probably the greatest talker ever. People said his conversation was like a bubbling fountain of wit and humor and insight, and just staggering. My favorite one-liner, you might say, of Oscar Wilde's, he was famous for being unimpressed with great things that other people are. He came to America, and he went to Niagara Falls, this great wit, playwright, important speaker, earnest. And somebody said, "What do you have to say about Niagara Falls, Mr. Wilde?" He said, "Probably the second great disappointment in the life of an American bride."
That is cutting edge.
That's not bad.
That's not bad. You got married in New Orleans, as did I, or we. What is your very favorite thing about the Big Easy? Obviously somebody from New Orleans.
About New Orleans? I love New Orleans. I came to it sort of late in life. I'm not late in life, but I'm 30 maybe. Believe me, that's not late. But it's just magical in a way that it's hard to put your finger on. You're in Mr. Woody Allen went to New Orleans to make the soundtrack for one of his films, and he's a jazz buff, and he just loved the place. And he said it's more foreign than many foreign countries. The French Quarter of New Orleans is. Yeah. And I really, really took to it. I think I may have seen a ghost, but if I didn't, I'd be about the only person in New Orleans who hasn't ever seen it.
Are you a foodie?
What?
Are you a foodie? Do you like food?
I like food, yes. It's the eating of it that I enjoy. But I'm not nuts about it, but I've never had a bad snack in New Orleans. It's like being in France.
I know.
It's just all
it's amazing.
good. Well, you and I have a lot in common.
Like,
Well, you went to Lincoln High School.
Yes.
In New Orleans.
yes, I love New Orleans.
We're both mistaken for Jean-Louis Barrault every
Yes.
so often.
I used to be mistaken for Dr. Phil.
Dr. Phil.
Yeah, before I went gray. I have gray hair.
You were mistaken for Dr. Phil.
Yeah, I had a mustache. I was doing the Larry Sanders Show. I had a mustache and dark hair, and people would congratulate me on saving their lives. And I said, "I'm not Dr. Phil," and they went, "I know that you're being modest," and
Yeah, you don't want
everything like
people to
that. I got one the other day who just said, "I love your work," and it's just so wonderful, Mr. Gould. They thought I was Elliot Gould.
Elliot Gould.
How can I be Elliot Gould?
Yeah.
How do you like being famous? Because you're famous. Did you always want to be famous?
You never feel famous, I don't think, for quite a while. And then some of the negative things start to seep in after you have been seen on television and so on and so on. And people ask you boring questions and take selfies just as your fly has been opened by mistake. The timing of selfies can be really bad. And
Do you say yes or no?
about flies?
Flies
selfies.
and selfies.
I don't know. I usually do it. But autographs, before there were selfies, selfies can be kind of fun, but autographs are a plague, especially when there are 20 people or even 5, and you've just done a hard show and your stomach is upset and you want to get home. I saw it happen to Jack Parr once. I was such a groupie of his, I'd go to his shows at the Hudson Theater, the late night shows, and I would run around back where I used to like to watch Jack get in a limo. And you'd have dreams of, will I ever get in a limo someday? And he was just getting in the limo. He was tired. He was sick at the time. And a guy says, hey, Jack, can you sign this? Yeah, it's put to Bill and Harry and the gang down by the something restaurant. And Jack says, I just signed him, pal. I don't do custom work. You can use that. By the way, before we close, before these wonderful people, say Jack Benny to me. I don't know when they want us off of here.
Jack Benny.
Oh, now? Okay. Jack, may I have a drink while you have one?
You wanted me to say Jack Benny to you, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, here's your cue.
Jack Benny.
Who? Jack Benny. To me, just one of the greatest people who ever lived. I mean, not just as a comic, a great comic. He was known for some reason as the cleanest act in vaudeville, and yet he killed him. And he was the nicest man. Sort of a dumb-sounding thing to say, but everybody. He was sort of like the opposite of Danny Kaye. I mean, someone whose name I don't want to mention. I don't know, anybody who didn't like Jack, he was generous. He paid people's hospital bills anonymously. Wow. He was great to young comedians and actors. And I just loved him. I had him on the shows, you know. And, one day when I was just still working on the staff of The Tonight Show, and I would always hang out with Sid Caesar was on, I'd get in his dressing room. But I loved talking with Jack Benny. And he came off from The Tonight Show, got into his Burberry coat to go home. He got into an elevator, and I got into an elevator with him. But so did some tourists, and they weren't supposed to get into the Stars elevator, but some of them crowded in. You had to feel sorry for him. Of course, everybody knew who he was. They'd just seen him on the show and everywhere else. And as the doors closed, on the 7th floor, person 1 said, are you really cheap? Somebody else said, do you still not pay Rochester much? Is anyone old enough to know these references, by the way? What about the rest of you? Are you teenagers? Anyway, these are the signal things from his show. You still got a man in a vault under your house guarding your money? Do you still drive a Maxwell car? They got them all. And he would kind of wince, but he was such a lovely man, he would just nod. Got to the bottom floor. Everybody ran out to tell their friends what had just happened. And I kind of put my hand on his shoulder, and then I didn't. And he saw that, and he put his hand on my shoulder. That was nice. And I said to him, Mr. Benny, like what happened in the elevator, doesn't that get kind of old? I mean, over and over, year after year, the same things. And this lovely man said, you know, kid, sometimes you just want to tell them to go fuck themselves.
I think I can't think of a better ending than that.
Okay.
I just, it's such an honor for me personally As I told you on the phone, you've been very important to me. I studied everything you did. I hear that you may be doing a podcast. Please, please, please do it.
Oh, yeah.
Or come back on the air or whatever, because we need someone like you. We need. Well, we need your sanity, we need your humor, and we need satire, and we need someone with laughter and humor to get us back to the fork in the road.
Holy
And that's you.
mackerel.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dick Cavett.
Thank you. This is the place where I would say, well, you're not so bad yourself. But it's a thrill for me to be here with you. And thank you for at least the first 4,000 laughs and moments of pleasure you've given me on the screen.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And